They handed me a pre-written statement and told me to read it to the police. "You have no real career, Clara," my mother hissed, pressing the pen into my hand. "Your sister has her whole future ahead of her. Take the blame for the accident, or you're dead to this family." My father didn't even look me in the eye as he pushed the car keys into my coat pocket, setting up the narrative that I was the one behind the wheel that rainy night. They thought I was still the quiet, timid girl they had pushed around for years. They thought I was an unemployed loser, hiding out in a small apartment. What they didn't know was that the courtroom where my sister was scheduled to be arraigned wasn't just any court, it was mine. Comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached, and stay until the end to see how their greed completely unraveled. My name is Clara Vance. At 32 years old, I had spent the better part of my life learning how to become completely invisible to the people who were supposed to love me most. In the Vance household, there was only ever room for one star, and that was my younger sister, Chloe. From the moment she was born, Chloe was treated like royalty. My parents viewed her as the ultimate extension of their own ego, spoiled, pampered, and shielded from every single consequence of her actions. I, on the other hand, was the black sheep. I was the quiet, studious daughter who didn't fit into their shallow world. The moment I turned 18, I moved away, put myself through college, and eventually put myself through law school on full scholarships and endless night shifts. My family didn't care to know the details of my life. To them, my lack of social media posts and quiet lifestyle meant I was a failure, probably hiding out in some tiny, miserable apartment, barely making rent. When I was appointed to the county bench as one of the youngest judges in our district's history, I didn't even bother calling them. I knew how the conversation would go. My mother would somehow turn my years of grueling hard work into a footnote about Chloe's latest trivial achievement. So I kept my life private. I let them believe I was struggling. I let them think I was powerless. I had no idea that their total ignorance of my true life was about to become their ultimate undoing. It was just past 2 a.m. when my phone shrieked from the nightstand, shattering the quiet darkness of my apartment. I reached for it, blinking against the harsh blue light, and felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach when I saw my mother's name on the screen. She hadn't called me in over 6 months. "Clara, get over here right now," her voice rasped into my ear, skipping any greeting. She sounded wild, panicked, and sharp enough to cut glass. "Don't ask questions. Just get to the house immediately, or don't bother ever speaking to us again." Before I could even respond, the line went dead. I stared at the phone for a brief moment, a deep sense of dread washing over me. Instinct told me to turn off my phone and go back to sleep, but years of ingrained habit made me reach for my coat instead. 10 minutes later, I pulled into the driveway of my parents' sprawling suburban home. The garage door was partially raised, casting a dim, yellow glow onto the pavement. As I stepped inside, the smell of burnt rubber and metallic heat hit me immediately. Standing beside my mother's brand-new luxury sedan were my parents and Chloe. My sister was hyperventilating, her face pale and streaked with tears. But it was the car that caught my attention first. The front passenger side was crushed inward, the bumper hanging by a thread, and the headlight shattered into 1,000 tiny fragments. Someone had hit something hard, and judging by the sheer terror in the room, it wasn't just a guardrail. "What happened?" I asked, stepping into the glaring lights of the garage. My father didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed my arm with a grip so tight it left bruises through my coat sleeve, pulling me closer to the ruined sedan. "Chloe had a little accident," he said, his voice terrifyingly calm despite the tremor in his hands. "She was driving back from a party, got distracted, and clipped a parked sports car down on Elm Street. Then she panicked and drove off." "A hit and run?" I stared at Chloe in disbelief. "Are you insane? You need to call the police right now and report it." "No," my mother practically shrieked, stepping between me and my sister. She reached out and thrust a crumpled piece of paper and a pen directly into my chest. "Nobody is calling the police until you write this down and memorize it. You're going to tell them you borrowed Chloe's car tonight. You took it without asking, lost control on the slick roads, and panicked." I felt the air leave my lungs. "You want me to take the fall for a felony?" You have no real career, Clara, my mother hissed, her eyes dark with a cold, desperate cruelty. Your sister is in her second year of medical residency. A hit-and-run conviction will destroy her life. She has a real future ahead of her. What do you have? You're 32, living in a cheap rental, working some dead-end office job. It's family duty, Clara, my father added, stepping in to block the garage exit. We've supported you your whole life. Now it's time to pay us back. You sign that statement, or you are completely dead to this family. We will disown you before sunrise. I stood in the cold, oil-stained garage, watching my parents shield their precious golden child while preparing to throw me to the wolves. A familiar ache tried to bloom in my chest, but I shoved it down, replacing it with the cold, unyielding precision of a courtroom strategist. I realized right then that reasoning with them was impossible. If I flatly refused, they would spin a story to the police, lie through their teeth, and try to pin it on me anyway. To beat them, I needed indisputable proof. Fine, I said, letting my voice quiver just enough to play the part of the broken, intimidated daughter. I took the crumpled paper and pen from my mother's hands. If I'm doing this, I need to know every detail, so the story holds up. Did anyone see you, Chloe? Chloe wiped her nose, sniffing loudly. And no, she stammered, completely falling for my act. It was dark, but the sports car was parked right under a streetlight. I hit its driver's side hard before speeding off. As they babbled on, explaining how they planned to cover up the damage and brief their expensive, high-powered defense attorney, my hands rested inside my deep coat pockets. Tucked safely in my right pocket, my smartphone was silently recording every single word, capturing their confession, their threats, and their conspiracy to frame me. Our lawyer told us to have you surrender at the station first thing in the morning. My father sneered, belief in his own dominance shining in his eyes. They genuinely thought they had trapped me. They thought I was walking into a trap, totally unaware that I was laying one of my own. The morning of the preliminary hearing arrived with a cold, gray drizzle. Outside the municipal courthouse, my family strutted across the plaza like royalty preparing for a coronation. My father had hired the most expensive defense attorney in the city, a man named Arthur Vance, who practically radiated slick, high-priced confidence. My parents and Chloe walked closely together, whispering and chuckling softly, utterly convinced that their meticulously crafted plan was about to wipe Chloe's slate clean. They glanced back at me sitting quietly on a wooden bench in the hallway, assuming my stillness was the silence of absolute defeat. When the courtroom doors finally swung open, they marched in and took their seats in the front row of the gallery, smug and triumphant. Chloe sat with her chin held high, wearing a pristine white blouse meant to make her look innocent to whichever judge took the bench. I remained standing near the entrance for a brief moment, watching them fix their clothes and whisper final instructions to their attorney. They thought I was going to walk down the aisle, sit at the defense table, and read the false confession my mother had forced into my hands. Instead, I turned away from the gallery and walked straight into the private judicial chambers behind the courtroom. The bailiff, who had known me for years, bowed his head respectfully as he held the door open for me. I stepped inside, reached for the heavy black silk judicial robes hanging in the corner, and slipped them over my shoulders. As I zipped up the robe, I took a deep breath, looking at my reflection in the glass. The quiet, timid girl they had pushed around for 32 years was officially gone. It was time to call the court to order. The heavy oak door opened, and the bailiff called out, "All rise for the Honorable Judge Clara Vance." A suffocating silence fell over the room. I stepped up to the bench, my black judicial robes flowing around me, and looked down at the gallery. The transformation on my family's faces was instantaneous. My mother's mouth dropped open in complete shock, the color draining from her cheeks until she looked like a ghost. My father half stood from his bench, his eyes wide with horror as he gripped the wooden railing for support. Beside them, Chloe looked like she had just seen a monster, her arrogant smirk entirely wiped away. Their slick, high-priced defense attorney froze mid-sentence, looking frantically between his clients and the bench in utter bewilderment. "Please be seated," I said calmly, my voice echoing off the high wood-paneled walls. I looked directly at my family, letting the silence stretch for several agonizing seconds before I spoke into the microphone. Due to a severe conflict of interest, I am immediately recusing myself as the presiding judge in this matter. However, before doing so, I am submitting official evidence into the court record regarding a felony hit-and-run, evidence tampering, and an attempted conspiracy to frame an officer of the court. My father gasped loudly, but I didn't stop. I handed a flash drive containing the complete, crystal-clear audio recording from the garage straight to the chief prosecutor sitting at the state's table. This recording documents the defendant's explicit plan to file a false police report and coerce a confession. Bailiffs, please detain Chloe Vance for felony hit-and-run and detain Arthur and Eleanor Vance for obstruction of justice and witness intimidation. Before my parents could even scream out my name, officers moved in, clicking handcuffs around their wrists in front of a packed, stunned courtroom. In the weeks that followed, the fallout was swift and absolute. With the audio recording and the dashcam footage from the neighbor's security system, Chloe had no choice but to plead guilty to felony hit-and-run, resulting in the immediate revocation of her medical license and mandatory community service. My parents, facing criminal charges for obstruction of justice, paid crippling legal fees that drained their inflated savings. The fake, untouchable empire they had built on lies completely crumbled under the weight of actual law. They tried calling me dozens of times, sending frantic, sobbing voicemails begging for mercy, but I never picked up. I officially cut all ties, finally freeing myself from the toxic shadow I had lived in for 32 years. Standing up to them wasn't about revenge. It was about holding a mirror up to their entitlement and forcing them to face the truth. I reclaimed my peace, my integrity, and a life built entirely on my own terms. If your own family pushed you to take the fall for something you didn't do, how far would you go to protect yourself? Comment your thoughts below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the video on your screen to watch another incredible story. Thank you for watching.